Hello and welcome back to Creative CEO. I'm Georgie Turner, an equestrian fine artist, and in this episode, I'm going to talk to you today about how I've even got to this point, what my journey has been from being a student at school doing art to then 9 years later discovering art again and turning it into a full-time business. I think there's a lot of misconceptions about how people have got to certain points. And I do this all the time. Like, everybody's journeys are completely different. And I'm not ashamed to admit that I have looked at other people and got really jealous about their success, and then having to remind myself, like, I don't know anything about that person and how they've got there, and I can't make a judgment on how they've got to that point because everybody has got a completely different journey. And I sometimes feel a little bit annoyed with myself that I never discovered this art earlier on. And actually, I discovered it and I'm trying to build it with a family. And I find that if I just thought about doing this earlier in my life, then I would be more successful than where I am now. But in reality, I don't think I would have got to this point if I hadn't been through the journey that I'd gone on. And I have to just constantly remember that if I do get a bit of like green-eyed envy, that it's ridiculous and I shouldn't be like that, because I feel like things happen in life and they happen for reasons, and people get to certain points in their journey at different times because that's the path that was set out for them. I'm actually going to do this podcast in two parts. So the first part of this podcast, I'm going to talk about my journey and literally how I got from being a grammar school student to where I am now. And then in the second part, I'm going to talk about how I would recommend starting a business and how I started my business and how I would advise somebody if they were going to start their business from scratch. So to give you a bit of backstory, I was always a bit of just like a middle of the road student, very much struggled academically with maths and with the sciences, and I don't know how, but I got into grammar school. No, I do know how. It's because I worked hard at my 11 plus. So if you don't know, a grammar school is a selective state school. It's not a private school where you pay to go to school. It is a state school, but you have to take a it's a very funny exam. It's not just a standard exam. It's like verbal reasoning, and I can't even remember what the questions were like. And I managed to get in to Ulster Grammar School, and it was the best place for me because I was always a bit like very shy at school, and I did get bullied in year 7, and I struggled with friendships like throughout school. But Ulster Grammar for me was just amazing. It gave me such great opportunities, and I always look back at my schooling, even though I had a few difficulties, and I'm so grateful that happened for me. And I was instantly one of the best students at art, and that was the only thing that I was pretty much good at, and English at the time. So the kind of and music. So the creative subjects I was best at. And then when I came to doing my GCSEs, I excelled in like the arts and the music and the English again. And I managed to scrape my maths GCSE and all of the sciences. I was actually put into like in grammar school, like at the time when I went to school, there were a lot less people in the year. So there were only 3 forms and there were 30 in each form. There was 90 students in the whole year, which now compared to my experience of being a teacher, like that's such a small school. And out of the 90 students, I think they selected 5 of us to do the lower grade science paper, and I was one of those 5. So I was really not strong in like certain subjects, but it doesn't matter because I still managed to I think I got B's because I only took 2 papers and the rest of the school took 3 papers or something. But yeah, so I was definitely, my stronger points were my creative subjects. And then at A level, I turned a little bit rogue and I became a little bit naughty. And it's because, the school, for the lower schools, so the first 5 years, you had to pass the 11 plus. And then in the 6th form, more students joined the school. So we went from like a cohort of 90, and then I think the sixth form was double that. So all of these new people came into the school, all of these new boys came into the school, and I was just like at that age where I just wanted to go out and like date people. And I was, yeah, I think that became my focus for year 12, which meant that my A level results were pretty shocking, because I think I got into year 13 and went, oh my God, if I don't pull my finger out, I'm gonna fail sixth form. So I ended up actually with a C in art. So for my A levels, I took English language, art, psychology, which I dropped in year 12 because I was awful at that. And I can't remember what else I did. Business studies. So, like it's all relevant to what I'm doing today. So I did art, business studies, and English language. And I think my overall results were CCD. So I didn't do overly well in terms of actual results, but I did art, enjoyed art. I did lots of painting back then. I don't think I'd ever touched a colour pencil except for sketching out. Acrylic was like one of the ones that we used most. And I actually, at the time, became a little bit obsessed with a clothing brand called Jack Wills. And I remember basically my entire A-level project was based around the Jack Wills catalogue, and I would draw the models and I would just paint people. Really, I'd paint people in acrylic, and that was like my thing. And we had to do like lots of photography, so we had to create our own reference photos, and I was always modelling in my Jack Wills outfits. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. Like I think back and just like we used to have double lessons, so it was 2 hours of art, and I just absolutely loved it. Even though I was a little bit distracted by boys, I'd still like loved the whole experience. And when it came to choosing our post school choices, I don't know what it was about that school, but everybody was pretty much going to university. It was almost like a given that everybody from that school would then go on to university. I remember thinking about my choices, and I think by that point, because I'd done 7 years of fine art from year 7, I was a little bit sick of it. I was a bit sick of painting and photography, and I think I just wanted to do something completely different. And I chose to do graphic design. And I actually remember my art teacher, Mr. Sofronio, he sat me down and he was like, are you sure you want to do graphic design? Because you're arty, you like painting and you like drawing. And I was like, yeah, and I'd already submitted my application, and I was like, yeah, it's fine, I'll just leave it. And I was quite happy. I got into University of Gloucestershire, which is in Cheltenham, and it was just the perfect place for me to go because I needed to leave home but not go too far. Like I've always been very like attached to home and attached to like my comfort zone. So it was a good place for me to go because it was only an hour away, but it was still far away enough that I had a bit of like freedom and independence from home, but also like I could come back on the weekend if I wanted to, which I did quite regularly. Came back for a roast dinner. And yeah, so graphic design, I learnt very quickly in the first week that maybe it wasn't the right course for me. Anyway, I was just determined to see it through, and I didn't want to change courses. Again, I'm a little bit of a person that likes her comfort zone, and like I'd already made friends on the course and I was really happy with the routine of the course. I stuck at it, and I'm glad I did because I learnt skills in that course that I might not have learned if I changed courses. And I wasn't really keen on doing fine art at the time. Again, I think I was just sick of it. I think I'd just done it for so long and I just wasn't in the headspace to do it. I had a great time. Like I've got absolutely no regrets about going to university and doing that. Like I learned so many new skills. Socially wise, it like made such a difference to how I interacted with people, and it was just a great experience and I absolutely loved it. But post university, I think it's very common that kind of after university, if you don't go straight into a job or you don't go straight into a job that's related to your degree, there's a bit of a no man's land where you're not quite sure what you're going to do with yourself. And I wanted to do something creative. I knew that, but I just wasn't sure what it was going to be. I always loved interior design, and I did do an online diploma course in interior design, and I tried to get some work experience, but I didn't really get anywhere with that. And I also loved upcycling furniture. I wanted to do like interior design, like upcycling. I knew what I wanted. And I remember my mum bought me a garden shed, which I turned into a bit of a studio. And I actually did do a painting of old dog Holly for my stepdad. So that was like probably one of the first times that I'd actually done a pet portrait. But yeah, again, I just wasn't really sure what I wanted to do in my life. And then as my relationship was moving forward, me and my husband, we actually went to school together, but we never knew each other when we were at school. And so there's funny because we've got a whole school photo, and I think we've got it here. And there's me in year 7 looking like a right geek. And then there's my husband in year 10. And I was like, how weird is it that imagine you're a year 10 and you fancying a year 7? Like that just would never, that would never even be something that you'd imagine. Like that would be gross back then. Here we are, like however many years later, and we're still that same age gap. But yeah, when you see like the whole school photo and you can see me in one corner and then him in the other corner, it's just quite funny that there was like a time when we were in the same space but didn't know each other at all. Sorry, I've digressed a bit. Yeah, so like when I post university, we got properly together during towards my second year of university, and it was lucky that he was still living in Stratford and that was where my home was. By the time I was like looking at doing interior design and looking at other things, we were a couple of years in. So I was like, we were going places. We knew that we were going to be together for a while. And I started back then already thinking about getting married. Like I always wanted to get married. And I think even though I wasn't really allowed to even talk about it because I didn't want to scare him off and talk about marriage too much, I still like the idea of weddings. So I started looking into wedding invites, and instead of being able to create my own dream wedding invite, I was making wedding invites for other people. I remember having a portfolio of maybe 5 designs. Everything was handmade and cut out, and like things had folded out versions and had versions where you like pulled the invitation out. Like they were all very crafty and very creative. So that was something that I did try and pursue. And I do remember going to one wedding fair and getting, people took my business cards, and I remember going to having a gazebo up and showcasing my wedding invite. So that was my first introduction into having an idea and then turning it into a business. At the time, I was actually working at Jack Wills, which was that brand of clothing that I was obsessed with when I was in sixth form. And I was working there and like building like skills, talking to the public. And then I think I had a couple of jobs. Like I went and worked for an insurance company, and then I went and worked for a recruitment company. But I just wasn't really, I wasn't really feeling anything. Like I thought, I could have a really easy admin role, but then try and build up my invite business on the side. And nothing was really going anywhere. And then it got to a point where I was having what I now call my early life crisis. And I remember just thinking, I'm not making any money. I wasn't making much money in the roles I was in because I was working at the bottom of the chain of whatever job I was in, because I wasn't using my degree. I was just at the bottom of the ladder for everything. And I wasn't enjoying anything I was doing. And then I remember seeing an advert for teaching, and I remember seeing the starting salary, and I was like, whoa, that's more money than I've ever earned before. And that's the starting salary. And I did mull it over for a long time, and I was like, you know what, teaching students, like actually that sounds like something that I would be quite happy doing. Like it is a natural kind of thing for me, like to want to teach and want to like improve somebody's life in some way. And I just got to a point, and me and my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time, we discussed it because I'd have to take a year off work and he would have to support us. And we just decided to go for it. And I remember thinking, I can't teach primary school because I am awful at maths. I had to do a GCSE maths paper, I think, to get into the teaching. And I had to buy the books in that I would probably have bought when I was in 14, 15 to help me get through that paper, because it was a very similar standard. It was GCSE maths, and I was absolutely bricking it. I was thinking, I'm never going to get in if I have to take my GCSE maths again. But I did get in. And yeah, I remember thinking, well, I don't want to teach primary school because I would be worried about teaching maths. And there's not really another subject that I could do except for art. So I went for teaching art. And it was great because it finally gave me a direction, and I was still doing something creative, but I had a clear path then. I knew what I was doing. I had a year of teacher training. What I was able to do was, because I already had a degree, I went back to university and did a postgraduate, so a PGCE, a postgraduate in education. So I did that at Warwick University, which is closer to home. I didn't have to move out or anything. It was just a year. And yeah, I got my PGCE, did a years of training, and then got my PGCE, and then got my first job in Worcester, which was a good, like, over an hour's drive away. So it was a bit of a slog. And that was such an eye opener into what it was actually like being a teacher. It was a really difficult year, and it wasn't because of teaching in general. It was because of the people that I worked with. They took an instant disliking to me, and I just had the year from hell. But luckily, the second school that I worked at, because I was only there for maternity cover, so it was only ever going to be a year. And then the second school I worked at was so much nicer. But so my first job, I was teaching art, photography, and special effects makeup, which again, like, I'd never done that before. I winged it the entire year. Whilst I was at that school, I got really pally with the teachers who ran the special needs section. They had a little hub where, like, students with special needs, they would go out of certain lessons and they would go to that hub and do extra lessons and just have a supported area. And I absolutely loved going there, and I just made really good friends with them. Then I started thinking, oh, actually, maybe I'd quite like to focus on special needs students, because I really quite like teaching them. So the second job I got was a bit of a mixed job. I became a teacher for a group of students who were in year 7, and it was a support class to kind of bridge the gap between primary school and secondary school. So I would teach them most of the subjects, and I would teach them art as well. And I basically used my creative side to teach these other subjects. The history teacher, for example, would send me the work, and then I would adapt it and differentiate it and then teach it to these students. So I was teaching more subjects than I was ever expecting to, but I was, like, able to change it and make it all creative and then teach it to them. And it was like a support group. That was 2019 when I got that job. And then we all know what happened after that. So the March of that school year. So remember, the school year starts for us in September. So I got that job in September 2019. And then it was the March, obviously, we went into lockdown. And that lockdown, I didn't have any children. I was already engaged, actually. So there was one thing that would really messed us up, and that was we had to move our wedding. That was the stressful thing for us, is we didn't know whether our wedding was going to happen or not. And it didn't happen. We literally just moved it to the following year. But the reason why I love lockdown so much is because I got a break from teaching. We still had to teach online, but I suddenly had more free time. So I started creating art. And I know lots of people's stories are very similar to mine. Like, as soon as you had that extra free time, you then had the ability to do something that you loved. And I was able to do some art. And because I kept in contact with the teacher from the previous school, that's when I did my first pet portrait of a puppy that she'd bred for her daughter. So that was my first pet portrait. And that's where my art business started from. And the journey from teaching was important to do with that, because when I was teaching in my first school, in my training year and in my first school and in the school where I was teaching the special needs students, I was using colour pencil a lot, because in schools, colour pencil is the easiest material to get in and to get out. If you've got a class of 30 students, if you're using paint, you need to allow at least 15 minutes at the end of the lesson to clear away the paints, which by the time they've come in, put their bags down, done the starter, it's not a lot of time to actually paint. So when we used colour pencil, it made the lessons a lot easier because it was a lot quicker to tidy away. Colour pencil is a lot cheaper. Before teaching, I didn't really do any drawing. I did mainly like my upcycling and wedding invites. So it was teaching that actually started the whole drawing side for me. So when it got to lockdown, which was, by then I'd been teaching for 2.5 years, I'd done a lot of colour pencil by then, and that's when I thought, I'm going to use this time to actually do some of my own work. And that's how it all started. And then I think we had like a good couple of months at home, and then we started slowly going back into school, but with restrictions. And I remember thinking, as I was like teaching, and I kept thinking, oh, do you know what? I just really want to do, I want to go back home and do my drawing. And I think that's when I almost made a plan in my head that one day I would have my own business. Like one day I would leave teaching and I would go and have my own business. So because I was already engaged and I knew that at some point I would change my name to Turner, I think I'd already started marketing myself as Georgie Turner. Before I was even married, I'd had a website, I had social media, everything was branded under Georgie Turner Artist, and my husband actually used that in his wedding speech. Some people might have thought, why are you jinxing it? And I was like, nah, we've been together for ages, we'll definitely get married. So once I decided that I was eventually going to run my own business, like I just had it in my head all the time, but I wasn't ready to do it. So I had a couple of years where I was still teaching, but also doing my work on the side. And when I say on the side, I was literally doing it in the evening. I was going to school and then coming home and doing a couple of hours work. And I did that for a good couple of years. And then I fell pregnant. And in the winter of 2022, I had my first child. And then I obviously had maternity leave, which was just the best year ever. And that's when don't get me wrong, having a newborn baby doesn't offer you up any free time, but I didn't have to go to work, and I think by then I was utterly depleted. My energy and my love for teaching had just slowly depleted itself, and I just got to the point where by maternity leave I was just I didn't want to go back to work. I just enjoyed having a newborn, having a baby so much. I was really getting like some headway with clients. Like I was just loving the idea of having the freedom to be there for my child, run my own business, be at home more, and that really becoming like more and more of a need rather than just a dream. Like I needed to do this. In that time I wasn't making enough money in my business to quit, but me and my husband did compromise, and I decided to go back to work 2 days a week, and then I would have one day a week to work on my business. We decided that my daughter would go into nursery for 3 days a week, and 2 of those days I would be in school, and then one of those days I would be at home. And that Wednesday when I was at home was my favourite day of the week. It just being able to just focus on my business. And I was obviously still working in the evenings, but when you have a child, your evenings aren't really quite evenings anymore. So I was working on a Wednesday and then working whenever I could fit in any work for another year. And then it just got to a point where I was like, I want to make this a full reality. I want to be able to make my own money and make my own business. And then it was the May of 2024 I handed my notice in, because that's when you have to hand your notice in if you're a teacher. So yeah, my journey to get to this point was not straightforward, and I didn't become a full-time artist overnight. It was very gradual. And let's say it was 2020 when I went, yeah, this is definitely what I want. It wasn't until 2024, like August 2024, when I had my last teacher paycheck and I was done. My journey was not straightforward, and it took a lot of like compromise and persuasion of my husband, and my husband's been so supportive, knowing that this is what I want to do, but also being my reality checker and being like, yes, I know you want this to be your dream, but we can't afford it yet, or you're not making enough money yet. Speaking out loud about it, like looking back, I have absolutely no regrets, and I love like having a journey that I can talk about. You might have got to the point where you've quit your job and you're out of whatever employment you didn't want to be in. That's not the end. This is literally just the beginning. But it's nice that I've got like a bit of a story to tell, because I've learned so much. I had to go and do all of those jobs in my past to grow and to learn and to rule out what I don't want to do. And also with teaching, I've got that degree for life. Teaching is a very respected profession. Sadly, it's a very understaffed profession because of the incredible demand that's put on teachers, people like me who have gone into the profession and then gone out of it because they just can't cope with the workload. But I've got that degree for life. If I want to go back into teaching, that degree never disappears. And I'm not ruling out ever going back into teaching again, but I would definitely be I would definitely have to be in a different headspace than I am in right now. Maybe when I've got all my children are older or something, I just never know what will happen. But I'm so glad that I've got that degree, and I'm so glad that I had that experience of being in schools, because if I hadn't gone into schools and taught art, I don't know whether I would be here right now. So there you go. I hope listening to my story, I don't ever want to make my podcast like all about me, but I hope by listening to my story, it's helped you maybe in some way. Maybe it's just helped you consider your journey, and maybe it's good to think back and reflect on your journey as well, just to kind of ground you and make you feel like the place where you are in right now is exactly where you're supposed to be. So thank you so much for listening. I am going to actually record part 2 almost immediately after this, and I'm going to be talking about starting a business from scratch. So I'm actually going to talk about what I learned when I made that decision to have a business and actually go for it and become a full-time artist. So I hope you tune into that one next, and thank you so much for listening. I will speak to you very, very soon. Bye.